Morning after my surgery, my husband was already dressed when I opened my eyes. Not hospital clothes, not the wrinkled shirt he'd slept in on the chair beside my bed for the past 2 nights. He was in his good blazer, the charcoal one I bought him for our anniversary, and he was checking his phone with the kind of focus he never gave me anymore. "You're up," he said, not looking over. I'd had my gallbladder removed the day before, emergency surgery, the kind that comes with 4 hours of waiting in the ER while they run tests, and you lie there alone because your husband is just grabbing dinner. "I'll be right back." And then isn't back until you're all ready in a gown. The surgery itself went fine. The surgeon said I was lucky it hadn't ruptured. My husband said, "Great news," the way you say it when someone tells you the weather will be nice. That morning, I was 31 years old, still with an IV line in my left hand, and my husband was standing by the window of my hospital room in his anniversary blazer. "Where are you going?" I asked. He finally looked at me. "My parents are in town. You know they drove all the way from Kelowna. I can't just leave them at the hotel all day." I waited. Surely there was more to that sentence. There wasn't. "Nathan," I said, "I was just discharged this morning. We have to wait for the nurse to go over the post-op instructions. I can't carry anything for 6 weeks. I can't drive. My mom can come sit with you while I take my dad out. He wants to see the waterfront." I remember staring at the ceiling tiles. There's a particular kind of disbelief that doesn't feel like anger at first. It feels like vertigo. Like the floor has shifted 2 inches and you're the only one who noticed. "You want your mother to babysit me in the hospital," I said, "while you take your father sightseeing." "It's not babysitting, Petra. Don't make it dramatic." That was the word he always used, dramatic. Every time I had a reaction he found inconvenient, it was dramatic. When I cried after he missed our anniversary dinner for a work thing he'd known about for 2 weeks, dramatic. When I told him I needed him to come to my pre-op appointment because I was scared, dramatic. "How am I getting home?" I asked. He pulled out his phone again. "I'll call you a car, Uber, it'll be fine." We lived in North Vancouver. The hospital was in Vancouver proper. The Lions Gate Bridge in mid-morning traffic. Alone. After abdominal surgery. Because his father wanted to see the waterfront. I didn't say anything else. I watched him kiss my forehead. A dry, efficient press, the way you tap a button. And then he was gone. The nurse came in 20 minutes later to go through my discharge instructions. She asked if someone was coming to take me home. I told her my husband had a family commitment. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone choosing not to say what they're thinking, and then she went through the sheet of paper very carefully, pointing at every line. I called an Uber from the hospital bed. I was in the bathroom trying to get dressed when my phone buzzed. My father. My father calls every morning. Not because anything is wrong, just because that's who he is. He's 63 and he lives 40 minutes outside of Vancouver in Maple Ridge, and he has called me almost every single morning since I left for university at 18. It used to embarrass me. Now it's the most reliable thing in my life. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I sat down on the closed toilet lid because standing was harder than I expected. "Dad," I said, and then I couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't push. He just waited. "Nathan left," I said finally. "He's taking his parents to the waterfront." Silence. My father does not curse. He was raised by a woman who considered it a failure of imagination. But I know what his silences mean. And that one was loud. "What time does your Uber come?" he said. 20 minutes. "Cancel it." "Dad, you're in Maple Ridge." "Petra, cancel the Uber." I canceled the Uber. He was at the hospital in 43 minutes. I know because I watched the clock above the nursing station. He came through the door in his weekend jacket, slightly out of breath, and when he saw me in the wheelchair the nurse had insisted on, something moved across his face that I hadn't seen since I was a child. That particular parental grief of watching your kid be hurt by someone who was supposed to protect them. He didn't say anything dramatic. He just took the handles of the wheelchair and said, "Let's go home." On the way to the car, he carried my bag, opened the door, held my arm while I lowered myself into the seat, and then stood outside for a moment with his hand on the roof of the car, not getting in. I watched him through the windshield. He was looking at his phone, making a call. He got in and drove, and for a while, neither of us said anything. "I'm going to ask you something," he said when we were on the highway, "and I want you to think before you answer." I nodded. "How long has it been like this?" I looked out at the water. The North Shore mountains were gray and clean against the sky. "A while," I said. He nodded slowly. He didn't ask anything else. "My parents' house smells like wood smoke and my mother's coffee. She had the guest room made up already. I don't know how she knew to do that, because my father hadn't called ahead, but that is the thing about my mother. She just knows. She came to the car door before we'd even turned off the engine, took one look at me, and said, 'I've got soup on.' I slept for most of that day. The painkillers helped. When I woke up around 4 in the afternoon, I could hear my father on the phone in his office down the hall. His voice was low and careful, the way it gets when he's in professional mode. My father is a retired corporate lawyer. He spent 30 years handling contracts, mergers, estates. He doesn't raise his voice in those conversations. He doesn't need to. Nathan called at 6. "Where are you?" he said, before I even finished saying hello. "My parents' house." A pause. "Why?" "Because you sent me home from the hospital alone." "I didn't send you. I arranged a car, Petra. What was I supposed to do? Tell my parents to—" "I had abdominal surgery yesterday, Nathan." "I know that. I was there." "You were there for the part before. You left for the part after." He did the thing where he breathes through his nose. "I think you're being unfair." I was very tired. The soup had been good, my mother's turkey vegetable, the one I'd been eating since I was 4, and the painkillers were wearing off just enough that I could feel the edges of myself again. "I want to talk about a few things when I'm feeling better," I said. "Like what?" "Like the fact that this isn't the first time you've done something like this." He was quiet for a moment. "Is your dad there?" I didn't answer. "Petra, is your father there?" "I'm staying for a few days." "He's putting things in your head," Nathan said. "He's always done this. Every time we have a problem." "He drove 43 minutes to pick me up from the hospital," I said, "while you were showing your dad the waterfront." I ended the call. The next morning, my father asked me to come into his office. He had 2 mugs of coffee on the desk and a folder I didn't recognize. I sat down in the chair across from him, the one I'd sat in as a kid when he was showing me things, teaching me things, and he slid the folder toward me. "I had Beverly take a look at some things last night," he said. Beverly is his former colleague, a family law attorney in Burnaby, the kind of person whose quiet competence makes courtrooms nervous. Not to do anything, just to look. I opened the folder. There were 3 documents inside. The first was a summary Beverly had put together based on information my father had given her. The second was something I didn't recognize at first. A series of account statements. Our joint account. I hadn't checked it in months because Nathan managed the finances. He'd offered when we moved in together. Said it was easier since he worked in financial planning, and I'd been grateful at the time. I looked at the account statements for a long time. Over the past 14 months, Nathan had made 47 transfers out of our joint savings account, some to what appeared to be his personal account, some to an account I didn't recognize at all. The amounts varied. $800 here, $2,400 there, one transfer of $6,000 in November that he'd never mentioned. The total, Beverly had helpfully summarized at the bottom of her notes, just over $61,000. We had $61,000 less in savings than I thought we did. "He had signing authority on the account," my father said. "You both did. It's not technically illegal the way he did it, because it was a joint account. But Beverly flagged the transfers to the unidentified account. She thinks it warrants a closer look." I put the folder down. "There's one more thing," my father said. He reached over and turned to the 3rd document. "Your car, the registration." "My car is a 2022 Subaru Forester. I bought it 2 years ago, before Nathan and I were married, and I paid for it entirely myself, a combination of savings and a loan in my name only." Nathan's name was never on the loan, but 8 months ago, Nathan had asked me to add him to the insurance because it would lower our combined rate. It made sense. I said yes. I signed the form he put in front of me. The form had added him to the insurance. It had also, with a second page I apparently hadn't read carefully enough, added him to the vehicle registration. He was technically a co-owner of my car. The car he had driven to show his father the waterfront while I waited for an Uber after surgery. I sat in my father's office for a very long time. He didn't say anything. He poured me more coffee. He waited. "What do I do?" I said finally. He folded his hands. "That's your decision. But if you want to know what your options look like, Beverly can walk you through them. And I've spoken to a colleague at RBC about the account transfers. They have a process for this." I thought about the morning I'd woken up to find Nathan already dressed in his blazer. I thought about the anniversary dinner he'd missed. I thought about the pre-op appointment when I'd been scared and he'd said I was being dramatic. I thought about 47 transfers I'd known nothing about. "I want to know all of it," I said. It took 4 days. Beverly was methodical in the way that good lawyers are: thorough, unsentimental, precise. She helped me open a new personal account at a different institution. She walked me through the process of removing Nathan from the joint account, and since most of the assets in it were traceable to my income, the bank agreed the situation warranted further review. The $61,000 in transfers to the unidentified account. Beverly had identified it by then, a personal investment account in Nathan's name only, became part of a formal letter drafted by Beverly and sent to Nathan's home address, which was also my address, which was a detail I tried not to think about too much. Regarding the car, Beverly had a colleague who specialized in exactly this kind of administrative entanglement. The co-registration was reversed within 72 hours, tied to documentation showing the original purchase was solely in my name and that the registration change had been made without my informed consent. Nathan received a registered letter informing him that the vehicle was mine, that he was no longer listed as a co-owner, and that he had 48 hours to return it. He called me when he got the letter. "This is insane," he said. "You can't just." "The car is in my name," I said. "It was always in my name. Beverly's colleague has the original purchase records. Your father put you up to this." "My father picked me up from the hospital." Petra. "The joint account transfers are also being reviewed," I said. "Beverly's letter explains the bank's process. You'll want to have a response ready." He went quiet. I could hear him breathing. "I don't understand why you're doing this," he said. His voice had shifted, not angry now, something more careful. "I made a mistake. I should have stayed. I know that. But this, all of this, it's a massive overreaction to one bad day." I thought about 47 transfers. I thought about 14 months. I thought about the way he'd kissed my forehead in the hospital, dry and efficient, like pressing a button. "It wasn't one bad day," I said. "It was the day I finally saw it clearly." He didn't have anything to say to that. The divorce filing took longer than the account and the car, these things do. But Beverly knew a colleague, and that colleague was good, and the process moved with the kind of quiet efficiency that my father had apparently set in motion before I'd even finished my soup that first evening. I would learn later that he'd called Beverly from the hospital parking lot, standing with his hand on the roof of the car, before he got in to drive me home. He hadn't said anything to me. He'd just made sure I had options when I was ready. The morning the papers were filed, he called me at his usual time, 7:43, same as always. "How are you feeling?" he said. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my childhood home, drinking his coffee, looking out at the Douglas fir in the backyard that I'd climbed as a kid and fallen out of twice, and kept climbing anyway. "Better," I said, and then, because it was true and I hadn't said it enough, "Thank you, Dad." He made a small dismissive sound, the way he always does when you try to thank him for something he considers obvious. "You would have figured it out," he said. "Maybe, but not as fast." He was quiet for a moment. "The important thing," he said, "is that you called." I looked at the tree in the backyard, the same branches, a little higher now than they were when I was 8, and fearless. A different kind of climb ahead of me. A harder one, probably, but mine. I know, I said. I'm glad I did. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the surgery, not the Uber I had to cancel, not even the account statements with 47 transfers I know nothing about. It's the image of my father standing outside his car in the hospital parking lot, hand on the roof, making a phone call before he got in to drive me home. He didn't tell me what he was doing, he didn't ask permission. He just quietly made sure I had a way forward before I even knew I needed one. I think about what it takes to be that kind of person. Not the dramatic gesture, not the cavalry arriving, not the righteous confrontation. Just the quiet, steady work of someone who has spent a lifetime doing the right thing without needing anyone to notice. That's a kind of character you don't build overnight. You build it in the small moments, the ones where no one's watching, the ones where it would be easier to look away. Nathan wasn't a cruel person, not in the obvious way. He didn't yell. He didn't lie to my face. He just made a long series of choices that prioritized himself, his comfort, his parents' visit, his convenience, and told himself it wasn't a big deal every single time. That's how it works, I think. Not one catastrophic failure, but dozens of small ones. 47 of them, as it turned out. What I've learned, slowly, is that intelligence without integrity is just a more efficient way to cause damage. Nathan worked in financial planning. He understood accounts, transfers, registrations. He used that knowledge not to protect us, but to quietly, methodically protect himself. And for a long time, I didn't look closely enough because I trusted him, and because trusting someone you love feels like the right thing to do right up until it isn't. But here's the other side of that. I called my father. I didn't pretend I was fine. I didn't protect Nathan's image or make excuses or convince myself it was just one bad day. Somewhere underneath the painkillers and the exhaustion, something in me knew. And I listened to it. That took something too, not just the courage to ask for help, but the clarity to recognize that I needed it and the honesty to admit it out loud. My father used to say that the hardest thing in life isn't surviving the hard moments, it's making good decisions inside them, when you're scared and tired and you just want everything to stop. He modeled that my whole life in ways I didn't always appreciate. I appreciate them now. I'm still in that guest room sometimes, in my mind. The wood smoke smell, my mother's soup, the Douglas fir through the window, the particular feeling of being held by a place that has always been safe. I'm building something new now, and it's slower than I expected and harder, but it's honest. And I think that matters more than I used to believe. The tree in the backyard is still there, a little taller every year, still worth climbing,